Upgrading traits in Throne and Liberty is one of the game's more convoluted systems, but the more convoluted something is, the more opportunities there are for us to devise strategies that we can use to beat the market. I will warn you guys right now, this is the longest guide I have ever made. However, the first 20 minutes kind of contains all the information that you need to absorb this. The rest of the video is me applying these strategies to my gear and running through examples, so it's going to be up to you if you want to stick around for that part. So reviewing the basics, in order to enchant a trait, which just means upgrade it to the next level, I need a piece of gear that I looted or an extract that I bought off the market that is the same type, the same slot of item, and has the trait that I want to upgrade. So if I want to upgrade health regen on a weapon, it has to be another weapon that also has health regen. Helmets upgrade helmets, boots upgrade boots, and so on. The most straightforward way to do this is with an item of the same tier. So this blue will always upgrade this blue trait at 100% rate, and purple will always upgrade purple, but you can also use items from a lower tier. If it is one tier lower, like it is here, then I'm going to have a 10% chance, and if it's two tiers lower, so if I was using a green on a purple, then I would only have a 1% chance. If I fail this 10% or this 1%, I'm going to accumulate a resource called Blessing, and we're going to see this little green bar start to accumulate right here. This resource can then be spent at any time by clicking this button down here to increase the chance on my next attempt. It's only my next attempt, so in this case, I got an extra 8% for a total of 18%. If I choose to use this right now, I don't get to continue making 18% chances over and over again. It's only for the next one, and it gets spent whether it fails or succeeds. Green fails, as we just saw, are worth 8 blessing, and they're also worth 8 blessing if you fail them on a purple. Blue fails on purple are worth 40 blessing. So putting all this together, we can see that in order to guarantee a green on blue, I need 90 blessing, and in order to guarantee a blue on purple, we would need 450 blessing. This is the same ratio for both of these items, so in total, it's going to be 11 and a quarter fails to guarantee a level up. However, keep in mind that we also have this base chance of 10%. So while we're failing these 10%, 1 out of 10 of those is also going to go up. So when we combine that 1 in 10 with this guaranteed success every 11 attempts, what we end up with is 2 successes for about every 11 to 12 attempts, which comes out to an average of 5.5. I'll put the math up on the screen for those of you who want to see it, but you don't really need to understand the math. All you need to know is that when you're using extracts that are a tier under the item, like blue on purple, you're going to need an average of 5.5 of those extracts to equal 1 success. And then the last thing to notice here is that the blessing needed to use a green on purple is over twice as much as what it costs to guarantee a blue on purple. So if we're going to spend blessing, it's almost never worth it to spend it on green to purple. You only want to spend it on green to blue or blue to purple. Okay, we are almost ready to upgrade some gear. The last thing we need to do is just grab the prices of all the different traits that are available for the item that we want to upgrade. I'm going to be upgrading the Belt of Combat Prowess. This is a blue item that I'm going to be using for most of T1. Blue is a little bit simpler than purple, so we're going to start off with this. And the first thing I want to do is grab the prices of every single trait, including the ones I don't want, that it would cost to unlock for the item that I want to upgrade. The next thing I'm going to do is cancel this out, and then I'm going to go in and search by trait, and I'm going to start just grabbing the prices for both the green and blue versions of these so that we can compare them. And I just want to search by slot here. I don't need to search by the item. So the cheapest belt trait for max health, and then I go to blue and I click on belt again. I get the cheapest blue for max health, and then I'm going to do the same for skill damage and debuff duration and so on. You can see everything that I need here. So we've got the unlocks over in this column. We've got the traits that I actually want in blue here. And then we've got all the traits in green, including the ones that I don't want. We don't need to look at the blue versions of the undesired traits because there's no way we can use those to stack blessing. But just to walk through this, what we're doing here is we're comparing what it would take to use green extracts versus blue extracts. So the blue is very easy. We just have the prices right there. And in order to get the cost of greens, that's where we use that 5.5 ratio that I mentioned earlier. So we take the cost of the green and we multiply it by 5.5. And we can see right away that for skill damage resist and max health, these are going for about the same. So the green strategy is going to be better there. But for my third trait, debuff duration, using the blue directly is actually cheaper than it would be to use those greens. However, one advanced thing to consider here is that I don't necessarily need to compare these straight across. I can compare these diagonally as well. And the reason for that is I can use these cheaper debuff duration fails to then spend blessing on skill damage resist or max health. So I buy a bunch of debuff duration. If it goes up, then that's great. I got a cheap green upgrade there on a blue item. But if it fails, instead of using the blessing for debuff duration, I use the blessing for skill damage or max health, and I save a larger amount of Lucent. So if we wanted to keep it ultra simple, we would just start there with the cheapest trait that I actually wanted, and then I would use the green extracts and bank the blessing for the more expensive ones. But if we really want to be fully efficient here, there is one other strategy that we need to look at, and that is for junk traits. So let's say that my Belt of Combat Prowess already came with one of these traits at the bottom that I didn't want, and I was planning on converting it. Well, before converting it, I could buy these cheap green extracts that nobody wants and just slam them into that trait and try to generate some blessing off of it. And in order to see the cost of this, we use that 11.25 from earlier. This is how many junk attempts I would have to fail to guarantee a success. But then we have to increase this by 10% because one out of every 10 of those junk traits is actually going to upgrade the health regen or whatever, and I'm not going to get any benefit when that happens. So we use 11.25 times 1.1, which gives us 12.375. Don't worry about those numbers too much. It's calculated for you here, and I will link this spreadsheet in the description so you can start to use this. But what we want to notice here is that using bind resist as a junk trait, definitely not worth it. This 285 is a lot more expensive than any of the stuff I'm seeing being compared here. However, if I look at health regen, the cheap green extracts actually make this cost less than any of these strategies up here. And so if my Belt of Combat Prowess came with health regen, it would definitely be worth stacking a bunch of blessing using cheap health regen extracts, and then later using that blessing to upgrade skill damage resist and max health with those green extracts as well. If I didn't come with health regen on my belt already, I could also just add it. And in order to do that, that's why we kept track of the price of these unlocks over here. And so I would add the cost for getting one success with junk traits plus the cost of the extract, and I would see that it would take me 163, which is basically the same amount that it's going to cost over here just using the greens directly. So probably not worth the hassle and the added cost of conversion stones to add this directly, but there are going to be some scenarios where it might be smart to purposely add a junk trait in your second or third slot and then build blessing on it and then convert it. Okay, so let's do it. My belt did not come with any of these junk traits, and the cost to add them is not going to be worth it in this case. So we're going to go straight to the cheapest green and start building blessing on that. I already have the blue one, and so we're going to go ahead and just grab a bunch of the green debuff traits off the market. We're going to keep an eye on these. Sometimes if you buy a bunch of these, the price is going to go up. So I think I put 25 on the spreadsheet. So we'll just keep an eye on that. If I buy too many of these, then it could start costing, 30 or 35, and we're going to have to readjust. But we'll start off with just these 5 here. And then I'm going to get my belt here, and I am going to go ahead and unlock debuff duration. And we are going to start building on it. I have another debuff duration here that I farm, but we're going to just ignore that for now and pretend like I don't have it and just try to do this as efficiently as we can, assuming we were starting from scratch. I also have a little bit of blessing on the item already from when I transferred my green belt into this one. So that's something that we can make use of. And we'll talk about transfer blessing and how to use that more in the next part when we talk about purple items. But for now, we're just going to make these attempts and see what kind of luck I get. Successfully failed, successfully failed, successfully failed. All right, all 5 of these failed, and it's only a 10% chance, so we can't get mad at RNG yet. Let's go ahead and buy another 5, and let's keep going. So that message is what you see if it actually succeeds. And so now we are at 2 out of 3. From here, I could be in a situation where I actually bought too many of these. If I get lucky and the next one or two goes up, then I'm going to have some extras that I can't really use. So that is something to keep in mind. When you're getting close to capping out a trait, you might want to only buy these in chunks of 1 or 2 instead of in chunks of 5. But let's see what happens here. And the enchantment has seeped into the trait. Okay, so we got lucky there, and I have some leftovers, which is kind of funny. Now, as far as using this blessing, I want to use it on skill damage resistance because I actually farmed some max health ones from the temple already. So I'm going to unlock skill damage resist here. And then I need to, from here, kind of rethink what my strategy is going to be. I can no longer fail these debuff durations in order to get the cheapest blessing here. The extracts on skill damage resist and max health are going to be more expensive. We need to double check the sheet and see what we want to do from skill damage resist. But if you recall from earlier, we did already figure out that using the green extracts for skill damage resist is going to be cheaper. I'm really close to guaranteeing one success already. So I'm only going to buy like 4 of these at first, and we will see what happens with those. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if we check right now, we can see the total percentage. Green to blue, it's easy. It's just 1 to 1. So we know we're going to get an extra 64% for 64 blessing. And we're getting close to being able to guarantee this. I could gamble this at any time. I like to just calculate everything based on 100% because it's easy. But keep in mind that, you could fill this bar up halfway and then just flip the coin if you want to. So let's uncheck that blessing. Let's not do that on accident. And then see what happens here. Okay, so we got blessing for that one. So that was a fail. That was another fail. And then another fail. And now I'm at the point where I'm at 98%. So we could just kind of slam this one through. But I'm going to need to buy a couple more either way here. So we'll just attempt this last one. Okay, so now I know for sure that one of these is going to be free. So I'm only going to buy 3 this time. I could get lucky and it could only take 2. But we'll see what happens. So now I've got over 90, which is enough to force this through. So let's go ahead and just do that. And hey, the enchantment seeps in. Okay, and then we're back to rolling the dice. And look at that. I got lucky on the last one. So I did a quick tally, and we spent about 400 lucent here to get about 600 lucent worth of upgrades. So savings of about a third. Some of that was just due to good luck in this case, but we can use the spreadsheet to guess what our savings are going to look like. And even with worse RNG, we still expected to save around 15%. Nothing too crazy, but it's definitely going to add up across various pieces. And as we can see here, for blue items, there's only a couple strategies that we can use. They're all pretty quick, and it's not too difficult. But for purple items, we need to add another layer of strategy to this that's going to let us save even more, and that is blessing transfer. So all the blessing that is on the item, if I transfer this belt into another belt, I'm going to keep this blessing. But the traits that are on the belt all get deleted and converted into blessing, and the rate of that conversion depends on the tier of the item I'm starting with and the tier of the item that I'm ending with. So these are the values that we need to know, and the transfer rates for green are pretty low here. Probably worth filling up your green item with traits before you transfer it to blue to get that 72 blessing. But remember, when we're upgrading on purple gear, we're going to be working with chunks of blessing around 450 per level up. So we really want to get that blessing into the hundreds or even into the thousands if it's an expensive slot. And by far the most efficient version of this is going to be the blue to purple. The blue extracts are going to cost a lot less than the purple extracts, but they're going to give the same amount of blessing when that transfer occurs. The downside here is that I can only ever do a blue to purple once per slot. So I can transfer blue to blue to blue to blue however many times I want. I can do purple to purple to purple however many times I want. But once I go blue to purple, I can't go back. So the only thing I can do after that is just transfer to another purple or just transfer to the item that I actually want and start upgrading it using the methods that we already covered. So a really simple example of this in action would be my helmets. The traits I'm going for are going to be melee evasion, range evasion, and max health. Melee evasion and range evasion on helmet are both pretty cheap, so I'm not too worried about building blessing for those. I'll probably just buy the blue extracts and just use the plain method. But max health was really expensive last time I looked at it, and so I wanted to make sure I had enough blessing to cover that max health slot. So I needed 3 max health upgrades to be covered. Those are 450 blessing each for a total of 1350 blessing. So if I just did one blue to purple transfer, that would be enough to cover 2 of those level ups. But I wanted to cover the last one too, and I had a bunch of junk blues that I was just looting from doing abyssal dungeons anyways. So I smashed a bunch of these Crusader helmets together and a few other helmets that I was looting. And then I didn't necessarily fill these out perfectly. I wasn't too worried about it because this was just to go from blue to blue. And I ended up using 3 or 4 of these helmets, kind of 2/3 of the way filled up, just whatever I had looted, since those weren't going to sell anyways. And then I transferred blue to blue to blue. And then the last blue that I had, I made sure to fill that one up completely because that was the one that was going to go blue to purple. And then that's the one that I ended up sending into my helmets. And I ended up with about 1400 blessing. The blessing that I've accumulated since then is from pieces that I've thrown into this melee evasion. So I didn't even really need to build that much, but again, those pieces weren't going to sell anyways, so it was either use them for junk blessing or salvage them for magic powder. Now, if I want to calculate all the different transfer methods, plus the methods that we went over when we were doing the blue belt, I'm going to need a bigger spreadsheet. And you guys know I live for this. This is the simplest that I could make this. It's going to look like a lot at first, but I assure you this is like multiple pages worth of data condensed down into a very usable format. So once you start practicing with this, it's going to make a lot more sense. And basically what we're doing here is I've got the item that I'm going for down at the bottom. So in this case, that's going to be a skillful bracelet from the arena. And then I have a junk blue section and a junk purple section. These are the cheapest items available to stack blessing on for blue and for purple. So for blue, you should be looting these all the time. You should have some options there. You just want to find the one that's got the cheapest junk traits. For purple, you might be a little bit more limited. It's probably not worth going out of your way to craft a junk purple, but if you loot a junk purple from time to time and it's not worth lithoing, then that could be a good option for a junk blessing. So we just want to put in the different traits that are available on that item and then grab the market cost for the blue junk item. And then we want to grab the market cost for both the blue and purple versions of the purple item. Finally, we put the cost for the traits that we want in both blue and purple on our target item, and then we put the cost for junk traits as well. All of this data is going to enable us to compare 6 different methods. So these methods on the end are the ones that we already discussed. We've got the blue and purples that I could just buy directly. That's the simplest way of doing it. We've then got the junk stacking method on our item. So this is what we would do if, like, my bracelet came with health regen. I could use this strategy to build blessing before converting it. And then these 3 new ones here are all the different transfer options, and I kind of put them in the order that you would need to do them. In almost every case, blue to purple right away is going to be the best option to use, but we want to make sure that it's worth using on each trait. And so what I mean is if I have a blue item that I'm filling up to transfer, it might be the case that I have 2 really cheap traits and then 1 really expensive trait. And so in order to compare that, I would go over to this blue to purple section here and I would click this drop down. I would grab the really expensive one, and now it's going to use this value down below. So whatever values you use from the drop downs, those are the ones that are going to get compared. And now we can see that this is no longer the best option. Now I've got some other options that are cheaper. So if I was transferring blue to purple, I would definitely want to fill up these 2, but not the third one. Once I've decided on my blue to purple, I kind of make a note of that, and then I click this checkbox. It's going to disappear from the calculations, and I'm going to see what's next. Really, the next step here is going to be just figuring out if blue to blue is worth doing at all. And in this case, we can see that it's not going to be worth doing. My purple to purple is going to be a lot more efficient, and we can build quite a bit of blessing when we're going purple to purple. And so we're just going to get rid of that blue to blue as well. And then it looks like our strategy here is going to be something like start off cranking this purple as hard as we can, transfer that into the target item. if the target item has a junk trait, then we will use that next. And then once we're done filling out that junk trait, we click that off and we're left with just the last two options of do I buy the blue ones or do I buy the purple ones? And if I've done a really good job of building blessing up until this point, I might not even have to consider buying the purples because I might have enough blessing that I can just only use blue extracts and guarantee all my remaining upgrades. Okay, so I've updated all the market values here, and we're now going to use this to actually upgrade a piece of gear. So the first thing I do is I pick the best option on this blue to blue dropdown and the worst, the most expensive option on this blue to purple dropdown. The reason I'm doing it like that is because I want to see if blue to blue is worth doing at all. And so I want to pick the best one. For blue to purple, I know that the cheap ones are going to be good. So I'm going to pick the most expensive one and see if that's also worth doing. So we're going to go down here and see, okay, yeah, even the most expensive blue to purple is going to be worth doing. So we go ahead and get rid of blue and purple early to make things simple. Now we want to compare blue to blue with some of the other methods. Right now I have kind of a middle option chosen for purple to purple, and it's still beating blue to blue in every case. So we can figure out pretty quickly that even the cheapest trade here for blue to blue is not going to be worth doing, and we can get rid of that. Now, to see the extent that I want to use purple to purple, we just go line by line and we pick whichever one is cheaper. So this is how much it's going to cost to generate 450 blessing if I use the blue extract, and this is going to be the cost if I use the purple extract. So we just compare these directly. If you guys want to know the math behind this, the way it works is that the purple upgrades are worth 120 blessing automatically, and so we divide 450 by that to get 3.75, and then we just multiply that here. And then the blue extracts, when they succeed, are also worth 120. When they fail, they're only worth 40. So 90% of 40 is 36, 10% of 120 is 12. We add those two values together to get 48, and that is our average value for each blue. We then divide 450 by 48, and that's how we get this value here. And so we just compare these directly. Again, you don't need to know the math. You can just look at these numbers and see that 131 is less than 328, and so we pick that one. And then we go down and compare and we see, okay, that looks really good. Next line, I can already tell because it's even lower, that 113, that's going to be worth doing as well. But for the last line, it might not be. We're going to pick 300 since it's the cheaper of these two options. And then we can kind of take a look and see this. If we want to see it a little bit more clearly, we can remove the junk blue on target item option for now and just compare purple to purple directly to buying the blue or the purple extracts. And it looks like this is definitely worth doing to build blessing for max health, but not so much for the other two. For the other two, I would be better off just buying blue for skill damage and then just buying purple for debuff. So probably what we'll do here is we'll fill up these first two lines on the junk item, but we won't worry about collision resist. And then now that we know what our strategy is going to be for the purple to purple, we want to compare the junk blue on our target item directly. In order to do this, I need to see whether or not that junk trait is already unlocked on my target item, and I actually haven't purchased it yet, so let's go do that now. So I'm here at the Castleton Arena, and I'm going to buy the bracelet that I want, which is the Skillful Charging Bracelet. If this comes with a trait that I want, that's really good because that'll save me the Lucent from not having to unlock it. But if it comes with a trait I don't want, I'm still going to find a way to use that to my advantage by building Junk Blessing on that trait, if it makes sense to do so. And wish me luck here. We got max health. That's what I'm talking about. So let's pretend that instead of max health, the bracelet had come with health regen instead. That's what this junk blue on target item is for. So I select the health regen value from this drop down here, and then it's going to tell me that it is definitely worth it to buy health regen blues and slam into this before I convert it, in order to build blessing for my number one trait, which is max health, but it doesn't look like it's worth it to build blessing for skill damage or debuff. So remember, the junk blue on the target item, that's going to happen after we're done with all of our transferring. We're going to do the transferring right now, and I'm probably going to end up with like 1,500 or 2,000 blessing on the bracelet. And so by the time we get there, that's more than enough blessing to cover max health. I only need 450 blessing times 3, 1350, to cover those max health upgrades. So the fact that this is worth doing for one trait means it's probably not worth doing at all, because by the time we get to this point, this trait's already going to be covered, and so I would really just be building Blessing for the remaining two. And by then we can see that just buying the blue extracts for skill damage is going to be better, and buying the purple for debuff is going to be better. Okay, so let's put this into action. I've already got this blue bangle set up to go, and I'm going to be transferring it first into this skillful shock bracelet. I initially was going to use the stun chance bracelet. I've changed my mind. I'm going to go with the collision one now that we just bought, because I'm seeing a lot more people building collision resistance. So we're going to start off by doing this transfer here. And as you can see, it's got 1,000 blessing on it already. That's 960 blessing from the traits that are getting converted, and that has 72 blessing on it already from when I went from green to blue. I also purposely held back on finishing this bracelet off because I knew that the blue bracelet would level it up from 7 to 9. So we're going to go ahead and send this through. And now I've got a level 9 skillful shock bracelet that I can use. The extracts for this one are expensive, so that junk purple that we were looking at on the spreadsheet is probably not going to be worth utilizing in terms of unlocking more of these. I could pay 80 extra lucent actually to unlock on this bracelet. That might not be a bad way of getting some blessing built up, but it already has health regen. And I know, because I used Primal King's bracelet as my example here, which also has health regen, I know that that's going to be a really good option. So I'm going to just buy a ton of these health regen blues and start, or actually we're not going to use blues here, so we're going to use purples because that's cheaper. We're going to buy 3 health regen purples, and we're going to slam it into this thing. And then let's take a look at silence resist and see real quick. So this is how much I'm paying if I slam silence resist into a junk bracelet, and then the cost discrepancy we see here is just for the final blue extracts that I'm gonna have to buy to actually get the thing. But these are all looking pretty cheap. I would have to add another 80 on top of this to get silence resist unlocked. But even if I add another 80 here, that's still looking pretty good. We'll get the blessing for the unlock as well. All those additional unlocks count for 120 blessing, just like an upgrade would. So let's go ahead and grab this silence resist unlock. It looks like there's not a lot of these available, so I might just be getting lucky here. But let's now buy a bunch of double checking. Yeah, we're going to want purple for both of these options. So I'm going to buy 3 of each. And it looks like some cheap ones just got posted. And some cheap silence resist as well. So maybe doing a few refreshes is worth doing as well to try to grab these cheap ones when you're going through this process. And now we go back into the trait window and we find our bracelets. And then I'm going to use my unlock here to get silence resist as an option. And now we just go ahead and slam these. I want to be careful here. This is another junk purple that I'm planning on using, so I don't want to send this. I only want to use the extracts that we just bought. I'm actually going to be using this Primal Kings as fodder in just a second. So I have this blue here. We might as well just throw this in as well and hope that it fails, which it did. Okay, now we're going to throw in these extracts. And I am going to just max out health regen on this junk item. And then once I'm done doing health regen, we're going to do the same thing with silence. Okay, this item is completely cranked. We're not going to bother with the third trait. We've already decided not to. So now I'm going to transfer this into the Primal King bracers. So now I need to unequip this thing so that I can actually transfer it. And then we're going to choose the Primal Kings, and we're going to send this item in all its glory into the Primal Kings. And you can see that the blessing that it already had from going blue to purple is still there. Plus, it's got a whole bunch more blessing now from all the additional traits that we just put into it. So this Primal King is going to end up with 1912 blessing, more than enough to cover max health, plus enough to start covering skill damage as well. So here we go. And then for these Primal Kings, we're going to fill up health regen and silence resist. We already decided that for this one, we're not doing the third row either. So back to the market, I need to buy 4 this time because I need 1 to unlock as well. It just so happens that the cheapest one on here also works as the unlock for the Primal Kings, which is another thing that made it a really good option to use here as my junk purple. So I'm going to buy 4 of these, and then I'm going to buy 3 health regen. Back to the upgrading window, I'm going to unlock Silence Resist, and then I'm just going to slam all three of these into both lines here. Okay, we've got 2 lines, 4 out of 4. This guy is ready to get transferred as well. And so I find the item that I actually plan on using, my Skillful Charging Bracelet, and now when I throw these Bracelets of the Primal King in, I can see that the grand total we end up with here is 2750 blessing. So I don't even need to check the spreadsheet for max health or skill damage anymore. I know that those are covered with blue extracts. The only thing we're going to need to do after this is look and see what strategy we want to use for debuff duration. Back to the spreadsheet here, we are done with our purple to purple transfers and we don't have a junk trait to focus on. The only line we care about here is this last one, which is whether we should buy blue extracts or purple extracts. Remember, we're already done with these first two because I have an enormous amount of blessing to cover these. And these values are so close that it's really up to me. Do I want to take the gamble and try to get lucky, or do I just want to go with the sure thing? I'm going to have a little bit of extra blessing left over after I upgrade these, and so I'm probably going to go with the gamble option. Right now, skill damage is pretty expensive to unlock on this bracelet, so I might wait another week or two for that to come down. But for max health, we know that we've already got enough blessing to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and just find the 3 cheapest blues that are posted, and we are going to just max this thing out. Open up the bracelets, use blessing, and there we go. 1, 2, 3. And I still have just enough blessing left over to cover skill damage when that happens, and then a little bit of extra to gamble on debuff once I get that unlocked. So totaling everything up for this bracelet, if I didn't do any transferring and I just bought the max health and skill damage upgrades directly, then that would have been a total of about 2,500 Lucent for purple. If I had bought the blues with average luck, it would have been about 2,300 Lucent total. With the methods I just showed, we spent 1,100 to cover the upgrades for both of those traits, and that includes the cost of the extracts that I needed to spend that blessing as well. So that's a savings of over 50%, and that's just on 2 traits. Now the savings won't be as big for debuff duration because it's not as expensive of a stat, but as you can see, for the more expensive traits, this makes a massive difference, cutting the cost by more than half. We do need to consider the opportunity cost of the junk purple items that I use. Those could have been put in the lithograph book or turned into lithograph recipes to sell on the market. However, with the items that I used, neither one of those were very compelling options at the moment. And then the other thing we need to consider is the solent that it costs to transfer the items. We can save some solent by transferring lower level items, but if I'm working with gear that's already upgraded, as we saw in the case of this bracelet, I ended up spending something like 3 million solent to do all this transferring. We can convert that into a lucent cost as well by using blue marins on the market. So we spent about 6 precious epic rarity marins worth of solent to do this. So we can check the market and see that that's about 60 lucent worth of value. But even when we add that to the 1100, it's still considerably lower than not transferring would have been. Got one more long example for you guys here just to get us some more practice. I'm going to be upgrading these Darkslayer daggers here. And so I've already put in the prices of everything on the market. The junk blue that I chose was Shadewalker daggers. As we can see, it's got 3 really cheap blue traits that I could use to upgrade this up for blue to blue transfers. And this is an item that drops a lot in Cilius, so I have a few of these in my backpack already. Same thing with the crossbow of Infinite Steel. I just happened to loot these somewhere. I don't remember where, but when I checked the traits, I saw that it did have 3 really cheap options. I wouldn't craft something for this purpose, but you just have to look and see what your options are based on what happens to be in your inventory. For example, this longbow of resistance, if I click on it and check the traits, I can see humanoid damage, max health, and buying chance. There is generally some demand for these last 2 here, so this probably isn't going to be the best item to junk stack on. But if I look at this Staff of Lucid Light and I check the traits, I see demon bonus, damage, max mana, and mana regen. These are all lower in demand, so this probably would be a pretty good item to junk stack on and get some blessing to transfer. And then the last section here is the item that we're actually going to be building out. So I've got the Dark Slayer daggers. I've got the blue and purple costs for the traits that I want to upgrade. And remember, this could be any weapon. This doesn't have to be the traits for the daggers themselves. The unlocking is a separate thing that we're going to either buy or use unlock stones for. In this case, since it's not a piece of boss gear, I'm going to just buy the extracts to unlock it. So we already know that we're going to do that. We set that aside and we focus only on the extracts that we're going to be using for upgrading. And then we put in the blue versions of the traits that I don't want, just in case it ends up being a good value to fail those on purpose in order to generate blessing. And so we're going to compare all that below. I'm going to pick the best option for blue to blue to see if this is worth doing at all. And then I'm going to pick the worst option for blue to purple, because if the worst one is worth doing, they're all going to be worth doing. And like we said before, this one tends to be the best. For purple, I'll probably just go with the worst option as well. In this case, I've got some really cheap options for all three of these. So 94 is going to be less than 113. So if it's worth doing at 113, that'll cover all three of these lines. And so we've got that settled, and then we're going to pick the best option for junk blessing as well on the actual item to see if that will be part of our strategy. Putting all that together, we go down here. We can see that blue to purple is the best strategy, even with the most expensive one chosen. So we know for sure that we want to do a blue to purple transfer. So we can go ahead and remove that. So the next thing we want to look at is, well, do we want to do some blue to blue before we get this item over to purple? And in this case, it looks like doing a purple to purple transfer is going to be significantly more efficient than doing blue to blue. So we don't need to worry about blue to blue for generating blessing. However, for this item, I am still going to do one blue to blue transfer. And the reason for that is because I'm currently using the Daggers of the Resistance, which are very good blue daggers. They're probably the most popular blue daggers that are in the market. And that means that the traits for this item are going to be more expensive because people will be using them for unlocks. Even the junk traits, if we look at these, probably weaken chance and humanoid damage aren't that bad, but at the very least, I know that max health is going to be more expensive to fill up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer these Daggers of the Resistance into the Shadewalker daggers, not to get any blessing, but just because the Shadewalker daggers are an easier option to fill up for my blue to purple transfer. So that's going to be where we start. But just to continue going through the strategy here, we already decided that blue to blue is not going to be worth doing in this case. For purple to purple, we've got some really good options here. We already know that. So let's uncheck that and just do a little final comparison here. And it looks like having a junk trait on my Darkslayer daggers would save me a little bit of money when it comes to heavy attack, but it's not going to save me money on these other two options. So it is not going to be worth doing any junk stacking. By the time we get this blue to purple and this purple to purple transfer, we'll have more than enough blessing to cover heavy attack, and we'll have some to cover our second and possibly even our third trait as well. So we're not going to worry about these junk blues here. We really just want to see how hard we want to go on that purple to purple transfer. We definitely want to do enough to cover heavy attack, since this is by far the cheapest option. But if we don't get enough to cover hit or crit, it's not a big deal, because just buying the blue extracts for hit and crit and upgrading the daggers directly, it looks very cost efficient right now. One last thing to note here with this strategy, if you remember all the way back from the beginning when we were upgrading that belt, when it comes to buying extracts, we don't just need to compare across, we can compare diagonally as well. And what that means is that if I just buy blue extracts for hit and crit, which are these ones right here, if I compare that diagonally to the cost that I'm paying for that heavy attack, it's cheaper here. So I'm still going to have to buy the heavy attack extract, which is going to be 20 lucent more than the hit chance extract. But even with that extra 20 lucent factored in here, it would be a viable strategy for me to just attempt hit chance blues on my Darkslayers. And then instead of spending the blessing on more hit chance, I spend the blessing on heavy attack. And so I'd be spending like 140-ish on average instead of 155. Now, using the blue extract strategy does introduce a little bit more randomness into this whole thing. And since it's only a slight savings, I'm not going to skip the purple to purple. But If you wanted to make this simpler, or if you wanted to take a little bit more of a gamble, you could just skip purple to purple here altogether, do the blue to purple, and then just go with the trait 2 and trait 3 extracts, since these are so cheap, and use the blessing on these to pay off the guaranteed cost for trait 1. Okay, so let's put this into action. I'm going to start off by sending these daggers into the Shadewalkers, and I want to be very careful to do all of this in the correct order. Each item can only receive 1 transfer. I'm going to need to unequip these before I can do that. So we grab a pair of these Shadewalker daggers and we transfer my resistance daggers, which would be too expensive to trait, to full, and we are going to spin the Solent and send this through. So I don't get any blessing from that. This isn't going to help me with my traits at all, but my weapons were already leveled up to 9, and I want to keep that progress. So that's why we're going through this trouble here. Now that I have these daggers ready to go, we're going to fill them up, and this is going to be my blue to purple. We already decided that we're skipping blue to blue. So I'm going to unlock the 3 cheapest traits here, and that's going to be mana regen and then undead bonus damage. I already grabbed some cheaper extracts of these off the market, and I have some that I just looted. So we're going to go ahead and just fill this in. Okay, so I've got my blue item ready to be transferred to purple, and I don't want to go directly to my target item, the Darkslayer daggers, because then I wouldn't be able to use any junk purples. Remember, we have to do this in the correct order. My Darkslayer daggers can only receive 1 transfer, so that transfer's got to be all juiced up before we send it in. So we're going to transfer instead to these crossbows of Infinite Steel. And we can see right there, we've got the 960 blessing. This is going to level the crossbow up to 6. If I wanted to save a few stones, I could manually upgrade the crossbow to 7.3 here. You guys have seen this discussed in other videos. It turns out that for T1, it's not that big of a difference, so we don't really need to worry about leveling up the item first if we don't want to. That might change in T2. We'll just have to see when we get that gear. So I'm transferring this in. And then I'm grabbing that crossbow from the trait window, and I need to go ahead and get these unlocked and leveled up. Let's double check the spreadsheet and make sure that all of these are going to be good options. So we'll get rid of these since they're no longer available. And then we've got a really good value on mana regen, so we definitely want to level that up for sure. But even with max mana and wildkin damage, this is looking like a pretty good value. We already kind of discussed and compared these earlier, so let's move forward. I need to pay attention to which column I'm using here. So for max mana and wildkin damage, I want the purple ones since those are cheaper. But this third line here, we can see that the blue option is cheaper than the purple option. So I'm going to buy blue mana regens, and I'm going to buy purple max mana and purple wildkin. So for wildkin damage and max mana, I'm just going to be using purple extracts. It looks like I happen to have some stuff in my inventory that matches these, so we could potentially use those. We'll just go ahead and throw a couple greens and blues in to clean those up. When it comes to the purples, I probably want to give it a little bit more thought. This is something I could use for yet another junk purple to stack on, potentially. It's also something that I would, want to check to see if I could turn it into a lithograph and make some money off of it, but probably not. Same thing with this Staff of Lucid Light. I could use this to just level up some mana regen and save me some blue extracts, but I'm going to try the blue extracts first just because they're so cheap right now that I actually kind of want as many of these to fail as possible so that I can get more blessing. So I'm not really in a huge hurry to use this staff and get this leveled up. Okay, so let's start going through and see what happens. I started off with 10 of these, and I'm just going to spam through them. And then that's me misclicking that staff 2 seconds after I said I wasn't going to use it, so I guess we'll just keep that in. I think I said something earlier about being careful when you're clicking these, but I should probably take my own advice. So I'm just about done clicking through these, and it looks like one of them went through, but I still have some room for more. Any of the blues that I buy now could be the last one, so I'm going to buy these like 2 at a time just so that I don't end up wasting too many when one of them goes through. Didn't get it, so we buy 2 more. And remember, failing here is really good value. This is something, if I had a junk trait on my target item, that I might be doing anyways to build blessing. And so each one of these that fails is worth 40 blessing. I'm paying 10 lucent a piece for that. I am not upset at all that these are failing. This is going to be really useful. Okay, so after 6 more attempts, we got one to go through, and we're now looking at a ton of blessing. When this item is filled up with purple traits, it's going to have 1,320 blessing just from those traits. So combined with this right here, we're going to have more than enough to cover heavy attack and hit chance, and then we'll have a little bit left over for crit chance as well. I'm going to be gambling crit chance with blue extracts already. We decided that earlier, so this is just going to help that process along. Let's finish this up, and this time I will be careful not to misclick that auto-selected book in the first slot. I saw a min price blue while I was buying max mana extracts, so we're going to go ahead and throw that in too. Finishing this up, it is now ready to be transferred into our target item. If I really wanted to completely be done with my Darkslayer daggers, I could do another junk purple to purple transfer here, but in this case, I think that's going to be overkill. We already know that upgrading crit chance is not going to be that expensive using blue extracts or purples for this item, and so we're going to go ahead and just only do one purple to purple. Finally, arriving at our target item, we select these crossbows, and all in all, we're sending about 3,000 blessing through to this item. And then I only need 3 blues for each one, and look at that. We just happen to snipe some cheap ones. I can guarantee all 3 of these hits as well, so I only need to buy 3 of those. We get these unlocked, and it looks like I already had a blue hit item in my inventory, so didn't actually need to buy 3 of these. So we'll just toss that in and see if it gets me some more blessing. And it did. I could also sell these back, but it's whatever. So let's start off with the heavy attack chance. I'll have enough to cover both of these, but I still want to kind of do them in order just to show the process. So the most important one is heavy attack. So we're going to spend blessing on that and guarantee it. And then we're going to do that 2 more times. Now I'm down to 1,600 blessing, which is enough to guarantee all these. So we do the same thing. And now finishing up the third one, we circle back to crit chance here. And I have almost enough to guarantee 1 level up, but we're probably going to do a little bit of gambling here. I also have a bunch of guild coins that I could use to buy more of these weapon selection chests. This is a good way to get weapon traits if you have a lot of guild coins and you're looking for something to spend them on. And I kind of forgot that I bought these last week, so I should have opened these before buying the heavy and the hit because I'm probably going to get 1 or 2 weapons that have those traits, but we'll just go ahead and open them now and see if I get any crit chance. And I actually got some insane RNG here, so I'm going to have to end up extracting and selling some of these traits that I could have just used a second ago. So learn from my mistakes and check your golden boxes before you upgrade your weapons. Now let's hop back over to the daggers and let's just start slamming these and see if we get lucky. So I'm approaching 450. If I want to get a little crazy here, I can do like a 98% click. And let's do this because if it fails for the video, it'd be funny. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I didn't actually think that 2% was going to fail. So perhaps use that as a cautionary tale as well. I don't know. That did use up all my blessing and not go through. So that's minus 110, 120 lucent worth of value or so from that 2% that I just whiffed. The reason it's 44 here and not 40 is because blessing can only be used, I think, in segments of 5 when going from blue to purple. And so those 4 points just kind of didn't get used, and then it added another 40 from the fail that we just had. Now we go back to clicking and we build up that blessing that I worked so hard for. There we go. We got a lucky one. Let's hope for some more of those. 2 out of 10 of those went up, so we're looking pretty good. I've got 404 blessing, and that's going to give me like a 90% chance. I'm just going to buy... Should I do 1 more and send it, or should I do 2? Let's do 2 more. Let's just do 2 more. Let's do 1 more. There's no way that it's going to fail 2 90-somethings in a row, right, guys? All right, 90% this time. If I did 1 more fail, it would be 98%. But we're just going to go for it, and you've got to be kidding me. Okay, so you may or may not wish to gamble on those 98 and 90% chances. And we're just going to send these in 2 at a time from now on until I get lucky. And luckily we got it on the second click there. So I'm finally done. I really hope you guys enjoyed this more in-depth content. I had a lot of fun making this video and the calculator. These things are time consuming, so if you want to see more content like this and you want to support me, consider joining as a member on YouTube or consider checking me out on Twitch and subscribing over there. There might be some slight benefits like getting access to a video a couple days early just as a way of me saying thank you, but in general, I don't really paywall or restrict any of my content, so I really am just doing this based on how much support you guys give me. So I appreciate all of that very much. I hope that you find some value in this, and I will see you again very soon.